Hello, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are in the world, maybe good evening. Thank you so much for joining. We are excited that you're here. This is a really important workshop for us, and you're going to be meeting some new Freestar team members. I'm really excited to have them here. So I'll go ahead and introduce everyone who will be presenting today. We have Matthew Whaley, who will wave his hand here. He is based in the UK and our COO. We have Ollie Burns, who's our SVP of Data Science, also based in the UK, right, Ollie? Yep. And then we have Dmitry Kazansky, who's our VP of Product based in California here in the United States. So without further ado, since we're here right on time and we have a vast majority of you who were early, which we appreciate, I'll kick it over to Matt to get started.
Hi, everyone. Nice to sort of see you all. I think we've got hardly any cameras on, but it's great to have such a good show. Everyone seems to be clicking in quite quickly. So what we want to really talk to you about is server-side bidding and exactly how Freestar is approaching that and what we're doing to enable this and why we should be doing it. So if you want to click into the first slide, I'll quickly talk you through the agenda. Okay, so we're going to give you a bit of a sort of like industry update. What is Freestar's server-to-server pre-bid solution? What we perceive to be the ideal ad stack, how technology works, and our tech. So if we flick into the timeline, so over the course of, as you can see in this timeline, probably the last sort of 8 years, we've gone through a real big transformation of technologies used and how we can really maximize revenue for publishers. And if you wind back here to sort of like 2014, there was very, very simple solutions for monetizing. Obviously GAM and AdX were king, and Google really did rule the roost. As we go step through to things like 2015, where you've got Prebid was launched, and Prebid was fundamentally a large initiative by like Magnite and Xandr, but back then it was Rubicon and AppNexus, to really give a solution to be able to compete with a Google demand in a real-time fashion, and something that could be really made scalable, and also something to stop complete dominance from Google. So as things have progressed at the beginning, that was really, really complicated technology, and not many people managed it. We've seen quite a progression now to the point where I would like to say that this concept of sort of client-side wrappers got to the point where they're a bit of a commodity. Lots and lots of people have them, lots of people using them, lots of different people have different versions of them. And at Freestar, we obviously believe ours is great, but fundamentally the core basics are quite the same. We're running off Prebid. We have lots of bells and whistles plugged on top of ours, but realistically, there is lots of wrappers out there, and it's now starting to get to the point where the wrappers really evolving to bring in things like machine learning and AI and make really, really intelligent wrappers that are delivering differently based on geo and device type, and and what type of websites are in ad units and so on. So where we want to talk to you through here is the next evolution to that is moving things away from the client and moving things onto the server, where you can be even more dynamic again. So if you could move on to the next slide. So Prebid, it's now a completely like a non-for-profit organization. There's a few people here listed that are members. There's fundamentally numerous different categories of parties that are involved. But so you have your large SSPs, you also now have DSPs involved, you also have technology vendors, and you also have what they call the community members. Freestar sits with the community, not the community, the publishers, and very much we're very actively involved in this community to develop the technology stack to enable everyone that's using it to have a better technology. Next slide. So from sort of like an industry update, you'll see, and you've probably heard, that numerous different parties are moving to a server-side bidding for the future. And it's got to the point now where we are actively starting to look at how we can make sure that the client itself, so in the browser, is as slick and as fast as physically possible, and as much of the auctions that can happen away from the device do happen. And realistically, if you're currently a Freestar basically partner, all of this functionality comes in on tap. You don't have to do anything, it just happens automatically. Next slide. I believe this is you, Dimitri.
Yes. So, is it okay? So, the reason, I guess, the key reason why pubs switch to Prebid is because they realized the traditional header bidding takes too much of a load on the servers, and it's just very hard to execute. And obviously, we all know that Prebid gives a lot more control on the inventory and how we can monetize it. On the flip side, the buyers are optimizing their supply path, and essentially they want to have as much of their dollars coming to publishers with as few intermediaries as possible. And I think Ali could lead us through
this is my bit. Thanks, Dimitri. Yeah, so my name's Oliver Burns. I'm the SVP of data science here at Freestar, and just wanted to talk through some of the reasons that Freestar has an advantage when looking at this server-side technology, and one of those main advantages is our reach. We've got an enormous reach through all the different partners that we work with, which gives us a great view across the market landscape. And with that comes a lot of data. We get a lot of observations. We get a lot of a huge number of impressions and bid requests coming through our systems. We record all this, and so that combined data gives us the ability to extract information and make smart decisions based off the back of that information, and that's really where Freestar adds a significant amount of value over a lot of other players in the market. And sort of my job is looking after the data science team and to maximize the sort of benefit of all that data, and we want to use that data to make smart decisions, and we internally and more and more externally, we call this the ideal ad stack. And here are some examples of what we've got in place at the moment and what we're working on, and that there's lots more to come. This is just the beginning of a long journey. So the bid request throttling, what that means is we can take all the data that's coming in and look at the bidders, and we can see which bidders in certain geos, in certain devices, under certain circumstances, are not bidding high, or they're not bidding at all, or they might be bidding lots of low bids, so they're just not winning the auctions. And we can throttle those bid requests, so we can say, well, we know that this particular demand partner is not going to bid for this particular impression, so we're just not going to send the bid request. What that does is it from the partner side, from the demand side, the demand partner says, oh, actually the quality of these bid requests are going up, and so the demand partner sort of sees then the domain and us as a partner to delivering higher quality bids through, because they're more likely to win. They're more likely to, when they bid, they're more likely to win, and that sort of has a compound effect over time, increases our and our partners' reputation in the market, and ultimately drives higher revenues. Another thing that drives higher revenues is our dynamic flooring algorithm. Again, we cut the market, or we look at the market into really small, tiny little fragments, and say, well, based on a whole bunch of different criteria, we know, based on our observations across the whole market, that this is the ideal floor price. This is the floor price that's going to drive us maximum revenue per ad requests. And we do that on a massive scale, and very granular. That's not something anyone could do manually. It has to be a machine that does it, because we're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of permutations and combinations of where we're sort of setting that floor price dynamically. We're also looking at, and this is very salient to this conversation, whether we should be setting the particular partner to or demand partner to run client or server side. So if you imagine that there's, let's say, 20 demand partners available for any one particular impression, depending on the device, where that device is in the world, and a whole bunch of other criteria, the combination of those partners, whether they're enabled client side or server side, or indeed turned off entirely, you can imagine, multiplies up to many thousands, tens of thousands of permutations and combinations. And our job then is to figure out, well, what is the best combination for this particular impression with these particular circumstances? And that we are looking to maximize the revenue per session that we get from the users. And then the sort of last bit in this set of examples is setting timeouts. By being intelligent about how we set the timeouts for the auction, we can increase the speed of the auction. We can get it to run faster. So we know that if it runs over a certain amount of time, that the bids that come in after that certain amount of time are not going to, very unlikely to win. And so we can shorten the auction. By shortening the auction, we get more completed auctions, we get more impressions rendered, and ultimately that drives more revenue as well. So these are just some examples of how we're using data to make smart decisions at a very fine granular level to drive better sort of revenue with our partners.
And I was just going to step into, because I didn't say this in the beginning, Ollie, with all that amazing information. If anyone has questions, this is really meant to be interactive. You don't need to wait till the end. So you can either raise your hand or you can go ahead and drop them here where I've typed in the chat to any of the experts on the call at any time.
Dimitri, your dice.
I think this is mine actually.
Oh, it's yours. Okay, go for it.
So how does the technology work from a server side standpoint? Okay, so if you were to look at the left hand side, this is your standard header bidding setup. So for every SSP that you have connected in your say Prebid.js, it will make an individual call out to that SSP to get a bid request. If you imagine here in this scenario, if you're on a poor connection, you're on a slow device, you're on something where the page is quite congested but for load, and then you start calling off 12 SSPs, you imagine everything just sort of grinds to a bit of a halt while it's trying to do all those connections. Where if you compare that to the server side, you're actually only making one call to the server. The server does all of the heavy lifting, and it's much faster. So it doesn't matter realistically what the connection type's like, how old the device is, or just generally what's else is going on the page. If you can make the one call out and get back, all your responses, it's generally much faster, much more scalable, and just generally better for the device and the user interaction generally, because obviously things just happen quicker. But a big drawback, and this just to go for a bit of a con, is one of the cons here from going server side is direct access to cookies, and that's why you have to have additional technology on top to do the user sync. Over to you, Dimitri. You're on mute, Dimitri.
Censoring myself. Now for some practical aspects of how to use a server-to-server solution. Most publishers that I know of who tried it, they simply first try a certain bidder in the client side, they move it in the server side, and they see wherever that bidder makes more money. And that, I believe, is a totally wrong way of looking at it. What you need to be looking at is overall, from all of your from your entire stack, do you make more money when a particular bidder is server side or client side? By the way, we've done a lot of control experiments that suggest that there is really, not suggest, definitively conclude that there is no such thing as pure incrementality, and sometimes you actually make more money if you don't call certain bidders at all. So another option, the third option is it's not just client, a server. It sometimes is neither. In certain circumstances, you just don't call certain bidders because they cause more trouble than the revenue that they produce. The second slide on the tips, please. It's I believe people who sign up for this webinar are sophisticated enough to know that they should never do or avoid as much as possible what's called a time over time test. So let's say on December 1st you moved a certain bidder from client to server, and then the revenue dropped. Maybe it would have dropped anyway, or if it increased, maybe it would have increased more, despite of what you just did. A better way, of course, is the controlled A/B test, where essentially you're moving a bidder in one treatment. The bidder is client side, the other is server side, and you measure again the total performance. Very important thing here is to mind interactions. Interaction is when the combined effect of multiple changes is different from the sum of individual changes. Kind of the best way to explain it is if you cook a pizza, you may notice that when you increase time in the oven by 5 minutes, it becomes tastier, or when you increase temperature, it becomes better as well. When you do both, you get really bad burnt pizza. So in this case, in case of bidders, you may notice that you get more revenue when you move, or higher performance when you move one bidder client side and the other client side. But when you move several of them, you actually get different results. So it's a bit of a tricky situation, and you need to test for combined treatments. The next slide is what is actually performance. So interestingly, most pubs they think that there is revenue and there is user experience. There are two different things that you need to balance. What we state is user experience is revenue. So the big advantage of a server-side solution is that the ads are faster and the pages are faster. That means that during a session, a user can see more ads because they can now visit more pages and more ads load on every page without a snag. And that has a really strong effect on especially revenue per session metric and revenue per user metric, which we believe is a much more indicative of the overall performance than some CPM or fill rate or CPM cost per 1,000 bid requests or even RPM. So if possible, test and optimize to RPS. And our approach on the next slide is kind of, before I get to it, let's say you do an A/B test and you realize that it's worth moving from your 20 bidders, there's 15 bidders, it's worth moving them to server. Overall, you make more money, as shown in your tightly controlled A/B test. Will the results hold? You did the test in November. In December, will it be the same, or in January, or next spring? No, things will change as bidder performance changes. Their server capacities change, the way the match rates change. So what you really have is a need for continuous optimization, which is really a multi-embedded problem where you have experiment of different combinations of client versus server, and you learn from them. And as the new data comes in, the algorithm adjusts settings and moves bidders between client and server based on where it is making more money now, not 3 months ago, but now. So that's essentially what the algorithms that Ali and team are building built. That's what they do. Just to make things even more complex, let's say overall you figure out that let's say OpenX, Spermatic, Index, and AppNexus need to be server side, right? Overall across all of your traffic. But do you know that this is also the best combination for 10 a.m. on Tuesday in Korea on category sports when the user has let's say ramp ID or some other identifier present? You don't. What you have really is for each situation there may be a different set of optimal settings, and that's what it's called. It's what's known as a contextual multi-embedded problem. It's a complex problem. Manually, even the simpler multi-embedded calculations, I attempted a couple of times. It took like even the basic calculation in Excel, and I'm Excel whiz. It took me 11 hours to do. But more, the contextual calculations, where for each situation you pick the optimal settings, incredibly complex. And I would say if I start doing them manually now, before the universe dissolves, I may not have completed my calculations, but that's Ali's algorithm does it every hour. And of course, it helps to have a lot of data. So maybe your site did not necessarily have a lot of impressions in Korea, but across 2,000 Freestar publishers, we do. So we do know what's the best setting for Korea at 10 a.m. on category sports for you, and that's what the algo does.
So on to the conclusion before we jump into questions. So just to go back to what everybody's saying, we can see by everything that we're doing and the way that the industry's going, and just the way for optimizations in the future that running the auction server side is the way forward. The complexity with doing that, as you can hear from Dimitri and Ollie speaking, is it starts getting very, very complicated when you really want to optimize every single ad call and every different cohort of users. What that really, really takes is having a tech stack that enables you to be very flexible about how you collect the data. You have to be able to collect it at scale, and then you have to be able to act on that data at scale as well, and be able to really make things which, as we've used the phrase, the ideal ad stack, which is very much completely different based on where the user is, what they're doing, the device type, etc. And again, pushing stuff out to the server. I'm not going to sit here and confess that we have a completely, the most finished product in the world, because I don't think there is a finished. There is a ongoing permanent optimization, and things change on a daily basis. And where we are right this second is we are in that real exciting phase of we've collected a lot of data. We are now moving much as we can server side, but we are very much at that sort of cutting edge of the industry where we have pushed a lot out to the server, and there's definitely more optimizations to go. So I'd like to think that these types of workshops we can have on a much more regular basis, which will really give you more information to what we're actually doing from a technology standpoint. And if you aren't using server-side bidding and you aren't a Freestar client, then please reach out to marketing@freestar.com and we can hook you up.
So that leads us into the questions. And again, I know not everyone's comfortable turning on their camera, but you can either drop them here, we can answer them live, or you can always email me and I will get them to the right person. I know this is really complex and there's a lot of layers to it. So does anyone have any questions? Do you have any fun questions? Any topics they'd like to see other workshops on? Was this helpful? Anyone want to share? No pressure. Okay, great. So Matt, do you have anything else to add then before we wrap today?
Apart from saying thank you, we've got obviously 32 people turned up. That's amazing. But yeah, so look, if anyone's got any questions or they wanted to maybe grab me offline and have another conversation, no problem at all. Happy to jump on calls.
Yes, and Richard, thank you for asking this. This recording will be shared with attendees, and we're happy to share the deck as well. So we'll send that out. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I know it's various time zones. It could be late where you are. We appreciate you. And we have kind of a fun workshop coming up in December. So that invite will be coming to an inbox near you. Thank you.